want to show you how to paint waterfalls and moving water. So I've got a photograph here that I've taken of a waterfall, and I'm going to use that as the starting point for our picture. So what I've done on a piece of watercolor paper is to draw out the waterfall and the rocks around it, just quite simply made a start for the painting there. And I'm going to start just by painting in some of the shadows that are on the waterfall. Now, water, when it's coming down like this, is white on the whole. When you look at it, you can see the white of the water as it falls down the waterfall. But in between, you get lots of shadow areas. You get parts of the rock below showing through. You get some sort of darker areas there. It's not just one white sheet, as it were. It's multicoloured and got different shades and different tones of colours in there. And I want to try and bring in some of these. I'm going to leave some of the paper white, but I want to bring in some other colours and to just try and paint those shadows and the areas that are shown through the thin sheets of water to the rock below. So I've got a purple here, I've got a blue, I'm going to add in some browns and some greens as well, just to try and bring in a little bit of colour there. So I'm just painting. I'm using Chinese brushes for a lot of this painting. They've got a very fine tip at the end, which is nice, and they hold lots of water. So I can hold the brush very loosely at the far end and then just sort of drop the paint in from above. So just put in some of the rest of the shadow areas that are up near the top of the waterfall. And then what I've done here is to go on and just block in some of the other colours all the way around some of the trees and some of the rocks and things, just to mark those in. Now, I want the water to show up very light against the dark rocks around. So I just want to darken some of these areas around here, cut in around the edge of that light rock on the left hand side with that dark bit behind it, using a flat brush here just to create some more angular shapes really on the rocks. Just lighten that down a little bit more towards the edge of the waterfall. But you can see now how the water shows up against the darkness. We need to darken in a lot of the background. It's just got a loose wash over everything really at the moment. It's marked in here with some of the rocks and things at the bottom, and just want to put in a bit of the little bush that's down there, a little bit of green there, which is nice. And again, just putting in lots of the green of the trees at the top, just tickling it in with the Chinese brush there, just dropping in the paint. Very loose, just creating the feeling of leaves on the trees going in. We'll put in several layers of colour there, keep changing the colours I'm going on here, but then drop in some other colours later on as it's drying. Just mark. So it just creates the feeling of foliage there, nice and loose, not painting every leaf, but just giving that feeling of the greenery of the wood. We want to contrast everything really with the light of the waterfall. So creating these sort of darker areas that make the waterfall appear lighter. It's all to do with contrast. You can make something appear lighter by putting something very dark alongside it. And that's what we're trying to do here. Now there's some little rocks that are poking through, so I just want to put those in as well with a bit of dark paint. Some little rocks there. Pop those in. And that just breaks up the water flow. Now what we can see here is that here there's quite a sharp edge between the rock and the water. Here it's much softer as the water's sort of dispersing, whereas on my painting it's quite hard edged right the way down. So I want to soften some of that. So I want to soften on the right hand side there some of the edging between the rock and the water. So I've just got a damp brush and a tissue, and I just want to soften it down and lift off some of that to soften that edge, so it looks as if there's a bit of spray coming off the waterfall. So damp brush, squidge it around a bit, lift it off, or use a tissue to do that. Whatever works really, it's just a matter of softening down that edge. Probably lighten that a little bit too much now, so we'll just darken that down in again, but leave that edge soft. As it's a bit damp there, the paint will just run into it and keep it soft. You can see now how that edge is a lot softer than the other ones. If you look at the other sides of the waterfall, then that little bit at the top there is much softer. It looks as if there's water bouncing around there and coming onto the rocks. So we'll do that down some of the other edges as well of the waterfall, just to soften them, and we'll contrast that with one or two other places where there's a rock in front of the water and you just see the hard edge of the rock, and that will contrast with some of these soft edges where there's a bit of spray splashing on. Now within the shadow areas here, I just want to put in one or two little other pieces as well, just little lines, little marks, just to darken down one or two areas, little bits where there's less water and you can see the rock underneath a little bit more. Don't want to do too much, but it's a matter of putting in something. So it's a matter of really being fairly careful about what you put in and what you don't at this stage. You don't want to overdo it and paint in the whole thing. And just using a little bit of Chinese white, here very opaque white paint, just to come in and to add some other little bits of froth and some other lines over some of these dark areas that I've got. Just taking in very thin lines really, just to break up some of those dark areas a little bit. With a little bit of water just splashing over the top. Just adding tiny bits of detail just to give that feeling of bubbling water, that feeling of moving water. And you have to judge yourself just how much you put in with that. Don't overdo it. Keep it understated, but just put in a little bit. Brushing the paint down a little, lightening one or two of those areas just a little bit where I felt it was a bit dark. And there we are. That's the finished painting, which I think has captured that feel of the flowing water. So why don't you have a go at doing that yourself?